are getting a clearer picture of how Americans are feeling about President Trump and his economic policy, now 12 weeks into his second term. CNN chief data analyst Harry Inton is here to run the numbers. Hello, Harry. Happy Sunday to you.
You as well.
Okay, so where are we with Americans and how they're viewing the economy?
Yeah, so a CBS News YouGov poll came out earlier today, and I will just say, I'll put it in stark terms, I believe this is the worst poll that Donald Trump has received in his second term, and we can go through it, Jeff.
Yikes. As we've been discussing, Donald Trump's disastrous economic mismanagement, totally self-inflicted, is resulting in the plummeting, the cratering of his approval rating and his economic approval rating, which could potentially portend a disastrous result for the Republican Party and a sweeping triumph for the Democratic Party in the 2026 midterms. Fingers crossed. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as I've mentioned, it's very important to keep track of Donald Trump's approval and popularity. Some context, okay? Number one, he's the president of the United States. Number two, his party controls both chambers of Congress, the House and the Senate. And number three, he has a sympathetic right-wing supermajority in the Supreme Court. So he has a trifecta. He is at the peak, the zenith of his power. The only pushback, the only meaningful check on him will be from Republicans. And much of that is tied into Trump's own popularity and approval rating, right? He's Teflon Don. He's the benefit of a cult of personality. So if he's suffering in the polls this early on with the shortest presidential honeymoon, this could spell disaster for his party, who are considerably more vulnerable to public backlash. And we're going to get into how even MAGA voters, Trump voters, are turning on him as a direct consequence of this. But let's first get into the data before I show you some of the really tragic anecdotes of Trump voters who are now regretting their decision.
Let's talk about the economy, right? Think the economy is getting worse. Back in November, it was 42% of Americans. You don't have to be a genius to follow this timeline. By February, it was 49%, March, 51%. Look at where we are now, 53%. The clear majority of Americans think the economy is getting worse, and that number is rising. When Trump, of course, won that second term, it was 42%. Now we're up 11 points. The clear majority, 53%. This poll and this number in particular is no bueno for the President of the United States, Jessica.
And who are they blaming for what they are seeing as an economic downturn?
Yeah, okay. So, obviously, you had Joe Biden before you had Donald Trump. And, of course, Donald Trump would say, you know, Joe Biden left us in a horrible state and I have to help dig us out of it. All right, so let's take a look here. More responsible for the state of the economy or the economic state. In March, CBS News asked about inflation, and 38% said it was Joe Biden who was more responsible, compared to 34% who said Donald Trump. Let's jump forward to now, in the month of April. Look at this number. 54% of Americans say that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's number has fallen from 38% to 21%. Donald Trump may try to blame Joe Biden for this, and maybe that was working a month ago in the month of March. But since the tariff war has begun, it's not working anymore. Americans are not buying what Donald Trump is selling them. They believe, the clear majority, 54%, that Donald Trump is more to blame for the state of the economy at this point than Joe Biden is, Jessica.
That is interesting to see how that evolves just in the last month, really.
Yeah.
How are they viewing tariffs?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the big thing when it comes to the state of the economy right now for Donald Trump is tariffs. So let's take a look here. All right. The tariff plan, new tariffs on importing goods, oppose versus favor. You go back to January. Look at this. 48% said they favored these new tariffs, these Donald Trump tariffs, compared to 46% who opposed. Look at where we are now in the CBS News YouGov poll. A switcheroo, Jessica, a switcheroo. The clear majority, 58% of Americans oppose these new tariffs, compared to just 42% who favor them. Again, this is part of the picture that we've seen throughout this presentation, right, Jessica? More and more people are turning against Donald Trump. Their views of the economy are getting worse. They are holding Donald Trump responsible. And when it comes to his signature issue, so far in his second term, tariffs, I mean, my goodness gracious, that trend line is ridiculously awful for Trump. The opposition number from 46 to 58 and the favor from 48 to 42. Americans have switched on a dime on the economy, on Donald Trump, in large part because of the tariffs, which they increasingly do not like.
And what's the biggest problem with Trump's plan for these people?
Well, I think it's the biggest problem that you hear our analysts say all the time is they don't know what the heck Donald Trump is doing. It's his approach. I mean, take a look here. Trump's approach to tariffs and trade, that is the way he's going about it. Just 37% of Americans like it. Look at this number. 63%, nearly 2/3 dislike it. Among independents, Jessica, it's just 28% of independents who like the way that Donald Trump is approaching tariffs and trade. And that's not much of a surprise because one day Donald Trump is saying one thing, the next day he's saying another. One day someone from his administration saying one thing, the next day that same exact person saying another. The message, simply put, is unclear. And it's the approach more than anything else, Jessica Dean, that the folks in the American public dislike about Donald Trump and his way that he's going about the tariffs and trade policy of the second Trump administration.
Very interesting. And then overall,
Um,
how does this affect his approval rating?
Yeah, okay, so we talk about the economy, right? But does the economy, the way people feel about the economy, equal the way they feel about Donald Trump overall? Because if it doesn't, if these two paths don't cross, then these numbers don't mean anything.
Right.
But let's take a look right here. Donald Trump's net approval rating. In early February, according to CBS News, look at that, it was +6. Late February, +2. March, 0, even approval, disapproval. Look at where we are now, -6 points. He's underwater for the first time in the CBS News YouGov poll, at least in his second term. Again, it's the trend line that's so important here, and the trend line and the American people are turning against Donald Trump. And that's why I said at the beginning, Jessica, that this, in my mind, is the worst poll that Trump has received in his second term so far.
All right.
That's pretty brutal, right? So again, you have Harry Enton there, like bringing out the data analysis on this. Again, probably the worst poll, the worst individual poll in Trump's second term. We've been tracking the Silver Bulletin, which is now the 538 is gone. It's the blog hosted by 538 founder Nate Silver, who's also aggregating and tracking and analyzing Donald Trump's approval rating. He's down by 5 points. He's underwater. More than 50% of the country disapprove of him. It's the shortest presidential honeymoon in modern American history. Donald Trump is objectively the least popular president since polling has been tracked. So since the age of, President Roosevelt, President Truman. It's really, really bad. And all entirely self-inflicted. Entirely self-inflicted. It's not like, there was, an external crisis going on, a war, a pandemic. The last time we were in a recession was under Donald Trump, although I will remind you in 2020, but that was in large part due to COVID, right? He had an obligation to manage COVID well. He didn't do it very well, but there was an external source, an external predicate, an external catalyst. There's no such situation here. It's entirely self-inflicted by Donald Trump. And I actually want to play a couple of clips as well of some Trump voters who are now publicly expressing regret, concern, misgiving about their vote because of the economic hardship they're now suffering as a direct result of Donald Trump.
I think it's been awful. I'm sorry. I got an oil change, and it's not even at a regular car dealer. It cost me $10 more. So I'm not seeing it. And why I voted for Trump was for the prices to come down at the grocery store. Nothing's come down. That's why I voted for Trump. And they're talking about your cell phones, your cars, and everything is just going higher. I know it might hurt for us now, but when it hurts now, it's hard to recover for someone like me. So it really hits me in the gut. I think
I want to play another clip as well, again, just to give you, we just went through the statistics, and I know the statistics to a lot of people don't mean anything, right? What about the personal stories? What about the anecdotes? That was one. Here's another.
With tariffs roiling retirement accounts and the markets, Donald Trump's longtime political superpower, which has been his handling of the economy, may suddenly be turning to a core vulnerability. That's according to Sarah Longwell, the Bulwark's longtime focus group conductor, who sat down with 9 Trump voters and asked them whether they were in favor of the tariffs. Fewer than half raised their hands.
The tariffs, I don't get, and it kind of concerns me a little bit. But I'm hoping it will make sense shortly. Right now, it kind of doesn't to me.
I am too a little scared about the tariffs because the stock market has plunged a few times, and I'm glad I just bought a newer car in December because the price is all up right now. So I'm still a little worried.
Yeah. How could she not be, right? Again, it's frustrating because as somebody who grew up in a red, rural, conservative area, and most of my family members are conservative, most of my friends are conservative, and most of them are Trump supporters. And I love them, despite our political disagreements, but the political disagreements are there, and they are intense, and they are visceral. And I'm not going to pretend that political disagreements that I have with people, or somehow, or rather that the political views that I find invalid are somehow valid simply because they come from my loved ones. This is something, unfortunately, which is very common in red states and red districts, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I've never really seen the benefits of Republican leadership, Republican governance, usually, typically speaking. The poorest, the least educated, the least healthy, the most federally subsidized states in this country, most of them are Republican states, not Democratic states. Democratic states, on average, are better educated, healthier, wealthier, less federally dependent, and are the source of economic activity in this country. Now, I want to be clear. Democratic states and Democratic districts have legitimate issues, and Democratic governance is obviously not perfect at the federal level or at the state level and merits criticism. Ezra Klein and one of his colleagues is writing an entire book about this and going on a campaign called Abundance, where they talk about how they feel that Democrats have been unjustifiably regulatory, that regulation overall is probably a good thing, certainly in certain areas, but regulation for the sake of regulation is bad, and it's undermining Democratic efforts, and that's why we're seeing, a mass exodus out of blue states into red states, if for no other reason, because red states are cheaper to live in. So again, I just want to be very clear, do that throat clearing, and emphasize that Democratic governance is far from perfect and merits criticism. But somebody who grew up in a red state, and just dominated by, again, Republican legislatures, Republican supermajority in Kentucky. We have a really good governor, Andy Beshear, and he does the best he can, but he's contending with a Republican supermajority who gets to basically call the shots. It's hard. It's frustrating. It's really, it really is frustrating to hear people come to regret their decisions when voting for Republican really it's never really benefited them to begin with. But this is really bad news for Donald Trump because, again, it's not just the statistics, it's the anecdotes. The anecdotes will become increasingly viral. Trump is locked in for the next 4 years. There's no way to vote him out. But this could, again, manifest in a seismic backlash against the GOP, which will hopefully happen. It's very, very possible that we will reclaim the House. I would say likely. It's unlikely that we will reclaim the Senate because Republicans enjoy just a disproportionate advantage there. And the Senate map, like those incumbents who are up for re-election, is still a tough map. But hopefully we'll get a clean sweep and take both chambers back, in which case we can hem Trump in and reduce his power significantly. Democrats need to be messaging on this aggressively, and we're starting to see some of that as well in a really positive way, but it needs to be a full court press. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.